In my opinion, Dragonsplague and Dragons Dogma 2 is a good mechanic. The first reason is playthrough diversity. Dragons Dogma 2's gameplay is focused on a power fantasy of whatever vocation you choose to play as. Whether it's a mage or a fighter, you can max out that character that you have and bring it to what you think that a shield and sword class would be, or a duo spear magic Jedi should be in your power fantasy. That's what the game is about. And the fact that this is the focus of the game encourages players to try and level up as much as possible, being that the level cap is 999 in Dragon's Dogma 2. It encourages players to do a new game plus with the character that they already have to keep leveling up to 999, just to keep maxing out their character. With Dragonsplague as a mechanic, each player's own experience is unique and different from other players. It makes even your own experience from your first playthrough be different from your experience in the rest of your playthroughs. Since the game's focus is gameplay and exploration rather than a super narrative driven story, if you're replaying through the game in New Game Plus or just a new game in general, this can break up the monotonous burden of, oh, I gotta go talk to Brant to go to the Masquerade quest so I can get here, and just keep progressing through this story that you've already seen 2 or 3 times already. If Dragonsplague in your second playthrough came in and railed Vernworth, now you're like, oh shit, I've got to figure out how to go to the dragon on my own now. That turns a lot of people off, and I understand that, especially since most people want to experience the story on their first go and move on with the game. But this mechanic caters towards hardcore fans of Dragon's Dogma 2 in reality, that are going to replay the game and try to uncover all of its secrets. Because I guarantee there are new mechanics and items that people haven't found yet in the game. And if you're just playing through the same experience over and over again just to see if there's new items or new mechanics that you haven't seen in your first playthrough, or maybe even get to the true ending that I'm not going to spoil here, because it's kind of like that adds to the replayability as well. If you're trying to get to the true ending again, it breaks up the monotony of like, oh, I gotta go do this and that so I could do a fluid experience to Batal, you know, or I gotta get my permit to go to Batal. Like, now you have to figure out how to get there on your own, instead of, oh, I gotta go through the main story to do this and this and this as a lineup of like a chore list. Now you have to actually figure out what you're doing, and not a lot of games do that nowadays. It really makes you have to adapt to what your experience is in the game, which I think is a heavy RPG element, even though many people probably think that this game doesn't have heavy RPG elements just because the dialogue isn't heavy, like a game like Skyrim or even old school Fallout or Witcher 3, where a lot of your narrative choices and your dialogue choices can affect outcomes. Instead, this game's gameplay mechanic choices are what affect your RPG story experience and how things played out. It doesn't feel as narratively impactful, if that makes sense, as to where, like, in The Witcher 3, and there's spoilers for The Witcher 3, depending on certain dialogue choices can, especially in the Baron quest, can affect the outcome of, oh, the Baron hung himself, or oh, the kids died. Instead, in this game, it affects your gameplay mechanics as to where, oh, the whole town died, now I have to figure out how to progress on the main story on my own. My second reason as to why Dragonsplague is a good mechanic is it brings out the player having to pay attention to detail. A lot of people say that the game gave them no warning before Dragonsplague happened to them, which I can't discredit anyone's unique experience, because it could be the case in whatever playthrough they're going through. Maybe the pawns didn't do anything that signified they had it. Maybe the game gave them no warning. I don't know. Most people said that it gave them a warning and said that they noticed different behaviors in pawns. I can't discredit anybody's unique experience. But in mine and most people's experience, there are many details that point to the possibility of one of your pawns having the plague, and that the plague is dangerous.
Let us work together to honor the Arisen's trust.
I mean, every time I hire a new pawn, they talk about the plague. Every time.
When pawns travel beyond the rift, we can contract a peculiar illness that imperils the lives of those around us.
But let's say you haven't hired a new pawn, then the next way of catching it is fighting a Drake, which is when the mechanic makes you pay attention to detail. It makes you pay attention to what your pawns are doing and saying. Pawns will show signs of it that are mostly obvious, like disrespecting commands and even straight up insulting you as the Arisen. Lastly, I want to talk about some missed opportunities that I feel happened with the mechanic. Number one is the fact that there is no option to cure it. For instance, I think it would be cool if there was a recipe, maybe using some kind of like anti-dragon material, or maybe even worms life crystals, to craft a medicine and have the pawn that's infected take the medicine and poof, the symptoms are gone and they're cured of the plague. I think that would be a cool mechanic. I understand why they didn't add that, because it kind of adds to the multiplayer aspect of Dragons Dogma, where people are constantly shuffling pawns, because when somebody hires your pawn, it cures them of the disease because your pawn gives it to their main pawn. I understand why they don't have that as a mechanic, but I think it would add to the world of Dragons Dogma. I think it would be pretty cool to have a cure. And maybe they do have a cure, maybe nobody's just found it yet, but I think it would be cool to craft a potion and the symptoms are gone after that. Number two, I think most people would agree with this gripe. I think that when you rest at the inn and the cutscene plays of the calamity, the outcome of Dragonsplague, I think it would have been way cooler if you woke up and it was some kind of crazy shadow dragon boss fight that you have to go through, and the consequences of losing to the shadow dragon boss is that the town dies. Personally, I think that would have been way better than a cutscene. I think if it was a boss fight with your pawn as a shadow dragon, or maybe even just a crazy version of your pawn, and you lose to that fight, then the whole town dies, not just the town is dead now. I think that it would have been like a way cooler experience than just a cutscene. But if you guys enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, comment, share, all that to support the channel. I appreciate you guys for watching. Have a good day.